Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to this TRaCE event featuring PhD graduates from the Faculty of Music. My name is Marie-Claude Felton, and I'm the manager of the TRaCE project. So we're very glad to have you with us for this event. And so it is my pleasure to introduce you to Professor Paul Yakinen. Professor Yakinen is the Tomlinson Professor of Shakespeare Studies at McGill and has been the driving force behind the TRaCE project for nearly a decade now. Not only is he the most accomplished scholar in his field, but he's also a pioneer in the field of PhD tracking and thinking about the future of the PhD. Thank you, Paul, for being with us and for introducing our two student hosts.
Thank you, Marie-Claude. And let me just say that Marie-Claude and Chantal Tovet, they actually do the work. They and the extraordinary group of graduate student researchers have done all the work on the TRaCE project. I just get to sit back and watch it grow. So thanks to Marie-Claude and Chantal and the wonderful graduate student researchers. The TRaCE project has been going on, as Marie-Claude said, for about a decade. The TRaCE McGill project is younger than that. We have tracked the PhD outcomes for about 5,000 PhD grads from across all the faculties at McGill. So we do good statistical work. We're very careful. We're very conscientious. One thing we do that no one else does at the scale that we do is we tell the stories. And this is something Nina knows a lot about. We tell the stories about the graduates by way of interviews because narrative knowledge is extremely important. And the third thing that we do, and again, it's something that is unique to our project, we are building a community of PhD grads and PhD students and people who are considering doing a PhD. And the idea here is they can teach each other. It's a mentoring and networking community. And I want to thank our host, Shanti, and Rebecca. And I won't name these remarkable three guests because they are going to be introduced by your hosts. But I just want to say I am so grateful, and we are so grateful for them to come back and share their knowledge with us. So let me pass things over to Shanti and Rebecca to get things going.
Hi, everyone. I think Shanti and I will briefly introduce ourselves and then kick things off. So I'm a second-year PhD student in musicology and feminist studies, and I study popular music and identity. Shanti, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Shanti. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in musicology, and I'm writing a thesis on the professional double bassist in the 19th century. And I guess now first Rebecca will explain the whole event, right? And then I'll introduce our three guests.
Yeah, so we're going to begin by asking Drs. Delgado, Penner, and Parks questions for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll move on to accepting questions from the audience, and we'll wrap up around 5 p.m. And we can have a chat after 5 p.m. too if people want to stick around.
Great. So I'm going to ask each host to introduce themselves and maybe just tell us what you wrote your thesis on and like where you are now, what your job is. So I guess we can go in alphabetical order and start with Dr. Delgado.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for having us here. It's a pleasure to share a little bit back to the McGill community. So I'm a cellist. I did my master's degree in performance at McGill, and then I continued to do a doctor in music performance. So which has a great McGill has a great program on that. So I mainly concentrated on contemporary music. There's an excellent cellist that world famous who I work with, and my field of concentration was the crossroads between contemporary music and tango. I'm originally from Argentina, and tango it is actually part of a national identity of Argentina. And I was mainly curious to see how the genre evolved, mainly after the contribution of Astor Piazzolla, who this year happens to be its 100th anniversary. So I had the pleasure to work with 3 Argentinian composers, who are 2 of them in Europe and 1 of them in the US. And I always, to me, what was very interesting was to do the research as a performer, and you know, to work with them, with living composers on new works that expands the expressive possibility of the cello performance and the genre in itself. So that's a little bit of what I did.
And what's your current occupation, or where are you now?
I'm a cellist, I would say. Well, now with the pandemic, not performing that much. A lot of virtual events, as you can imagine. A lot of planning, a lot of programming. But since I graduated from McGill, I've been actually teaching. I've been teaching at a foundation in Montreal. It's called Share the Worth. So they have a music program there. I also actually created a seminar, a graduate seminar in performance on the history of the tango, and I did it at McGill, which is great. The McGill gave me that opportunity. It was the first seminar, I believe, in Canada that offers the history of tango. And I perform a lot. I mainly play. I have a duo. It's called Stick and Bow, which is actually with a McGill graduate, a percussionist, a woman, Christina Marcoux. And we have been playing quite a lot in the last 2 years, major festivals across Canada and a lot in Europe. And so I perform a lot of mainly chamber music, and I do a little bit of research too at Kermit, which is an institution, a research institution affiliated to McGill.
Great, thanks. Dr. Parks, you're next.
I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I finished my PhD in music education in 2015, and my research was on exploring effective ways to train studio music teachers to work with students with autism. And so since I completed that research, I've really concentrated my work in special music education. It wasn't actually on my radar really at all when I started my PhD. But when I went to get started, when I was admitted to do my PhD, my eldest son, who's now almost 16, was diagnosed with autism. And so I was just researching autism all the time. So I decided to combine the two. But actually halfway through my PhD in 2012, I founded a charitable organization called Lotus Center for Special Music Education in Ottawa. I've been in Ottawa the whole time. I commuted to McGill. And we just had a mandate to provide music education for the special needs community. So now it's been 9 years and I'm still doing that, but now we have 12 teachers and we have partnerships with the National Arts Center and the University of Ottawa. We do research projects. We have a professional development institute. We work with about 750 students a year. And I really love my work in this field. And in addition to, like, that's my full-time job. In addition to that, for the past 2 years, I've been an adjunct professor at the University of Ottawa. It started with just a few sort of workshop courses, like through their Professional Development Institute, but now we have Canada's, so far, only certificate program in special music education, which I'm really excited about because it's a field that's growing a lot. I think there's a lot more awareness amongst music educators. I mean, anybody teaching music has come across students with some exceptionality, right? Even ADHD or something like that. And we don't get the tools to know how to work with those students and adapt for them and be able to provide them the same access, that typically developing students would have. So I'm really happy in both those spheres, in the very practical sphere of my work at Lotus Center, where we have music lessons and camps and all of that stuff, but also the research side and training teachers and all of that stuff at the university.
Thanks. Dr. Penner.
Hi, I'm really grateful to be here. Earlier when we first started, I had some internet connectivity issues, so hopefully it's okay. But if I disappear, that's why. So yeah, I completed my PhD in musicology, and my thesis was about how operas tell stories in comparison with other media. And it was combining musicology with analytic philosophy or Anglo-American philosophy, theories about narrative with musicological methods. And now I'm an assistant professor of music at Brock University. And it's just a contract position, so who knows what I'll be doing in a couple more years, but hopefully continuing at Brock. Yeah, and I'm teaching and courses in music history and music in society, and continuing research on opera and musical theater.
Great, thank you, everyone. So we're gonna start with some questions, and these are open to everyone. So if you feel like answering one question more than another, just unmute yourself and begin. What did you value most about your time in graduate school?
Are we going in order? The same?
We can start off that way, and then if people also want to answer the same question, that's fine too. Or if they would like, yeah, it can be casual, but we can start off by going in order to keep things more simple.
Okay, sure. I was asking because of...
Okay, thanks.
I think music performance, I think like any other major, but sometimes we concentrate so much on what we're doing. So we locked ourselves like crazy people in a little room, and we practice for endless amount of hours. And sometimes we lose track of what is going on campus, right? And sometimes reality too. But what I love the most about my time is that I realized the potential of McGill as a university. I mean, the potential of McGill in terms of research, like specifically, like speaking, there were like, I became friends with people who are not necessarily musicians, and I'm like, wow, okay, this is happening in McGill, right next door. And this is happening, and next week there is a seminar on that and guest speakers. So to me, that was very, very inspiring in a way to be in a place where like I wasn't only receiving like high quality education. I was very motivating atmosphere with my colleagues and friends, but also going on campus and getting in contact with all these people who are doing fascinating things and professors and teachers who are doing incredible things. So I think that's for sure one of the things high in the list of things that I value the most.
I'll jump in now. I think, and it's interesting because my experience contrasts a lot, because I was in Ottawa and I had two young kids. I think my kids, when I started the PhD, were like 5 and 2 or something. And I was teaching, like I'd been teaching piano for many years. So I had still a pretty full studio, and I was commuting to McGill, 2 or 3 times a week. And so I didn't experience as much that like community, because I wasn't there. Like, I mean, I pretty much had to like get back to Ottawa as soon as I was done everything. I didn't like hang out at McGill a lot. So for me, the value was more in really being able to immerse myself in that. I mean, I don't want to say non-practical, but for me, I've been teaching for so long and working, and I had this other stuff. So I was, in that sense, maybe not a typical grad student, but having this opportunity to kind of focus on my PhD and what do I really want my work to be, kind of what do I want my specialization to be, or what is of interest to me, and what do I really want to dig into, and having the time to kind of sort out what I really want to dig into, and then get to dig into it, and then kind of pivot that into a career after, like that. Those years that I was doing my PhD really was a big, yes, I was teaching before and I was in music ed, but it totally shifted, the trajectory of my work. And I think that time of just concentrated, what do I want to do, and let me mold and shape that, was what was really valuable for me.
I found a lot of resonance with what Juan Sebastian just said. When I came to McGill, I didn't have much of an idea of what I wanted to write my thesis on. Well, I had some idea, but then it went in a totally different direction because of the classes that I took and the people I met. Paul's from English. I took a course in the English department, and that really changed the direction. Like I was exposed to analytic philosophy, and I thought that was a really interesting approach. And then, and also with Aaron, I agree that the focus time, that's a really unique experience that you wouldn't get in any kind of other educational program, is the experience of devoting several years of your life to some really specific thing, whether that's a performance or a composition or research of some sort. That's pretty unique.
So the next question is, could you speak a little bit about the transition from the doctorate to the job market, and how you ended up in the job you're in now? Same order, maybe, if that's the easiest.
Sure. That's a good question. And okay, in my particular case, I mean, we're all musicians here, and either researchers or performers. So I think I think this idea could resonate to all of us. It's not, I mean, you could have 4 PhD in music and still not have a clear idea what you're gonna do afterwards in terms of job market. I mean, if I'm, really honest. In comparison to other professions in which, you have a PhD from McGill and say, okay, it's sure you're gonna end up with an excellent job. I'm not saying we don't, but sometimes the pathway to get there is a little tricky, right? It's not as clear as we imagine. But in my case, the good thing that I feel like I was doing a lot of networking and like real like concert experiences and contacting people from different festivals and teaching while I was in my PhD. So to me, the transition felt like very smooth. It's like, okay, I'm done with this. I can now concentrate on all these projects that I wanna. And I've been actually busier and busier like year after year. So I think I'm pretty happy, with how things evolved in a more organic way. But I think it's not that you go from A to B, but you sort of work out the way from A to B, and hopefully I think that's how it works for other people too.
Yeah, I think for me as well. I mean, I created my my position in the organization and everything, so it was already kind of there for me for when I finished. I was already doing it, but I think it would have been very different if it had been like 5 years of PhD or however many years you're working on it and just that, and then like starting out cold, because for me, it was, I started this organization and then it was kind of growing in those last couple of years of my PhD. And then I could really like ramp it up when I finished. The other part of my work though, obviously, being an adjunct professor came after. But, if I'm going to be really frank about it, I'm sure the PhD by my name helps with that job, of course. But I think what helps more is the work experience that I turned my PhD into. I think if I wasn't running Lotus Center, I wouldn't have this adjunct position. That's based on my experience, and it does all go together. I'm sure, being able to do research and stuff, that I learned as a PhD student helps a lot. But I think being mindful of that, there has to be both. Like, I think it would be pretty challenging if I had just stopped and wanted to get some sort of job in music education, like as a full-time professor or something. I don't think that would have maybe gone as smoothly as it, as far as transitions go, as it did for me. The way it worked was, I'm quite happy with where I am now.
The transition for me was bumpier. In my PhD, I was just focused on research. I did it. I taught, music appreciation class a couple times. So I had a bit of teaching. But, once I graduated, it was, there was about a year there that I was just trying to get some articles. I mean, luckily I have a partner who is an engineer. So he had a good job, and it was okay for me to just focus on applying and doing research. Yeah, I think if I didn't have a partner with a solid job, I don't know if I'd be in my position right now, because it's just, it took a long time. Like I graduated in 2016, but I think I was basically done in like a year before, just the timing, how it worked out. And then I got this gig, which is my first full-time, basically full-time position that's not a postdoc or like first full-time faculty position this summer. So if I didn't have someone to support me basically through that, I would have obviously gone on to other things by now. I hope this is not like, I don't want to be discouraging, but I think it's helpful to hear these stories. That I was very depressed. I went through several sort of mourning periods from my academic career. Actually, one as recently as, basically this time a year ago. And then that happened even before the pandemic. And then once the pandemic happened, I was like, well, yeah, I already sort of mourned that. And then this job came up, and I applied for it. And I didn't think I was the one that they wanted, but it ended up being that they wanted me. But yeah, so I guess, and I did a postdoc in between there. So there were 2 years where I was making money. But yeah, the postdoc was very, very helpful. So yeah, if you want an academic position, definitely go for the postdoc. But they're becoming increasingly competitive, so it's challenging. I suppose my advice, I don't know if that's the next question, but in terms of advice for students, I was maybe too focused on the research, and the teaching was good. That was very good. So definitely do teaching. I think it would have been good if I had thought more broadly. I was really like modeling my professors and what the academy valued, that they value just research. And I thought that, I was like, okay, I want to be a professor, so that's what I have to value. And yes, if you want a faculty position, you do need to produce research, obviously. But I think it would have been healthy for me as a person and in terms of my career prospects if I had served on, some committees, broadened my experience, did some more some like service type work that's not so highly valued in the academy. And that would help me right now. Like, I'm having to do that type of work. But it would also help, I think, make you marketable in other fields as well.
Great, thank you all for being so candid and honest about your experiences. We're interested in what experiences, when you reflect back on your PhD, that didn't feel valuable at the time, you now realize were valuable, if that makes sense. So it might have felt like pulling teeth at the time, but now you're like, oh, I'm really grateful for that experience or opportunity.
Well, sometimes I felt like I was a bit on my own. I mean, doing a doctorate degree in performance. When you even say, people don't get it. It's like, how is that? How does that work? And it's true that I remember talking to my colleagues, my friends, and we were all in that. At times, I'm saying we were a little bit at limbo, right? Like in a place where, I would go to my supervisor, and he's a super busy cellist, so he doesn't have the time to sit with me to, read a paper, or then I go to my research supervisor, and she's missing a bit the performance perspective, because that person necessarily doesn't have a performance career, and it's totally understandable. And we're in that middle point trying to balance out, how to give shape to my ideas and to my career in a way. And so at times I felt like, a bit lost, I would say. But now looking back, that made me have to really reflect on what I wanted to do with my research, what I wanted to do with my thesis, what the direction that I mean, at the same time, I had flexibility and certain freedom, right, to choose like certain things that I wanted to concentrate on, repertoire, or and yeah. Now that I look back, I think that helped me to have stronger opinions about certain things. That helped me now, perhaps, have certain things more clear in my mind. Yeah.
I think that, I mean, aside from just the basics of like doing a research, having to do, I spent all day today doing ethics proposals for another project, so that's very much on my mind, but having to do ethics applications and all of that stuff is, is good. But I think for me, they're kind of two sort of, I don't want to say negative experiences, but two kind of things that kind of shaped the way that I knew I wanted to move forward. One was when I started my PhD, I really thought I wanted to be a music ed professor. That's, that was my goal. And in kind of seeing, I guess, I don't really know exactly how to say what it was, but I kind of realized that I wanted more independence in my work. Like I wanted to be able to, I love the balance that I have now where I have Lotus Center and I adjunct because I do enjoy working at a university, but I don't have to. If I ever don't feel like teaching a course, I don't have to teach anything. I can supervise students or I can not, I realized that, even like I was saying earlier, having those 5 years to kind of hone what you want to do in your work and your research, even to that kind of made me realize like, who am I? How do I want to work? I'm a person that likes a lot of independence. I like to do my own thing. I don't really want to work for a university. I want to be able to kind of freelance isn't the right word because I, have solid employment, but do whatever I feel like doing. And I think that was really valuable. And then the other was an experience that happened really early with my supervisor. And, sometimes students and supervisors aren't always like the best fit. It wasn't horrible with mine. It was okay, but but pretty early on, I said, I would really like to apply to do a poster presentation. It was still early in my research, but, knowing what I know now, it would have been appropriate. And he said, you haven't even done anything yet. You have to kind of like prove yourself before you can do any conferences or whatever. And I at first felt really discouraged, but, after that, I was kind of like, well, I don't think he knows everything. And it kind of pushed me to be like, no, I can do it. I'm going to apply. They can say I can't come to this conference, but, I can at least apply. And I did, I applied anyway, and I was accepted, and I've been accepted to, I've done, I don't know, a dozen or more conferences since then. They've always been accepted. And just that sort of, message of you have to prove yourself first was it put me off a lot. I felt like, no, I don't. I can just do things and work and like build myself up. And so that was a really good lesson for me to just go for it and keep building up that way.
I think I'd probably have a different answer if I was not in the academy, but given my current job, I'm teaching at a small school, and I'm teaching like the complete music history sequence, like from medieval music to the present day. And I'm teaching this course called Music and Global Culture for first year students. That's supposed to be like a grab bag of music of the world. And and I am so grateful for the things like comps. Like I know, in it's a horrible experience, like, and maybe they could administer it better. It doesn't necessarily have to be so stressful. Though maybe I put some of that myself of just how I approached it. But that breadth, that like I had to really get into medieval and Renaissance music. And I was so grateful for that last semester when I had to be teaching that, because, I went back to my comps notes. I really did. And I was like, right, okay. So, and I picked the topics like really central, like genres that I was going to really focus on, and I drew on that a lot. I wish that I had been broader in what I had taken as my classes, because I was eager to get into that specificity, and I was like, oh, I just want to really take things that are going to lead me to that, and to that thesis. But in the courses, it's a time to like experiment and like be exposed to new things, and that might even change the direction of your research. But even if not, I mean, gosh, if I had taken like some more ethnomusicology courses, I would be really grateful for that right now. Or just get really into, I don't know, Hindustani classical music or something, and that would be really, really beneficial right now when I'm trying to teach this really broad class, and all my training is within the Western classical tradition, really. So
I'm going to ask now kind of the same question in reverse. Is there anything that you either put a lot of energy into or just felt really important during your PhD that now you feel maybe you shouldn't have spent so much time on?
Well, I think that life teach you a lot of things, right? I mean, especially in the music music education. I mean by music education, I mean music in general. Again, I think we have this perception in which you need to spend a lot of time with your instrument, which is absolutely true. I mean, you have to master an instrument or a concept, an idea, or method, right, to get really good at it and then do something with that. That's very necessary. But there's a whole lot of things around that sometimes they don't teach you. And not necessarily a PhD, but they didn't teach that to me in my master's or my bachelor degree. Or, for instance, now that one of my main projects is Stick and Bow is getting very important right now in my life, and we have a lot of commitments. We're extremely well organized, and we're working with a manager and with a label and with publicists, and sometimes it gets a bit overwhelming because whenever I have a little bit of time, okay, now I have time to actually practice the cello because I have playing at the Bach Festival in Montreal, and it's good. That means that you're busy, you're doing things. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes there's a whole lot of other things involved in presenting who you are as a musician. I mean, perhaps we could say that the marketing component, which in this world, which is highly competitive, there are a lot of excellent performers or researchers and institutions. How you show, right, that you're worth it, that you have something interesting to say, and that's something that doesn't come across very often. I mean, unless you happen to have teachers who have done it and who are successful musicians, but even though they don't have the time to teach you that, because they might teach you your cello lesson, but there's no time for any of us to get involved into all of these very specifics. And I wish that could be something that more like practical, like information experience to students.
I am going to say, I can't not really say that there are things I spent a lot of time on that I wish I hadn't. For me, it's the reverse. There are things I wish I had spent more time on. And it's not because I was spending time on other things in my PhD. It's just my life was just so busy and hectic at that time. But, like even now, and no, Nina, it wasn't just you. Comps are stressful. Like comps are awful. And after I did my comps and then I had to start working on my research, honestly, I just wanted to get it done. Like I just wanted to be done. And now when I look back at my dissertation, I think, oh, it could have been better. I really could have done it better, but I just was like, really honestly, pretty burnt out, and I wish, no one was putting that pressure on me. It's not like, anybody at McGill was like pushing me to get it done. It was just me wanting to get it done. But I wish that I had just let myself breathe with it a little bit and kind of give it some time to like really get into it and not feel like it had to be done in a certain timeline. I think there are classes that I took that weren't as valuable or useful to me as, you know, others. I think especially in music ed, there weren't a lot of classes that were options to take, but that's all small stuff. I do wish I had given myself as much time as I really needed to do a good job on my research.
I sort of have the opposite to say. I mean, not that I regret, like, you know, I'm proud of my thesis, but I think I could have found the time to do a bit more diverse like activities rather than just focusing on the thesis, as I said before in a previous question, so I won't go on about that.
Thank you. We're going to ask our last question and then move on to asking or accepting questions from the guests. Given the job market and you all have like very diverse careers from one another, do you think that it's valuable to do a PhD even if you do end up ultimately working outside of academia?
Well, I think it's actually an excellent question, because I mean, I have to be honest. Sometimes there were moments where I wondered how much having a PhD helped me, but in the I think in the big picture, yes, because I mean, having gone through the whole process, right? Having had to do research, having to defend a thesis, having to prepare and program concerts, having to interact with the committee, all of that work helped me, I think, who I am and I think who we are today. And I think, you know, it's not black and white. It's not, that's what I was saying before. It's not because, okay, I have a PhD, now I get the best job. It doesn't work, at least in my experience in music. You have to build your own path to get, you know, to a good position. But I think that for sure, I mean, as a performer, I mean, I like doing research, and to me now, I can't think of programming or thinking about composing a repertoire that I want to play, or without thinking about doing all the research, which is fascinating. It helps me my own understanding, but it also informs my own playing. And also when I present concerts, I try to not do it in a typical classical way, but I try to interact with my audience. I try to talk to them to say, hey, you know, I'm playing Bach and I'm playing Nina Simone, and she was a classical pianist and she was inspired by Bach music. And even saying that little thing, you know, people appreciate what you're doing in a much different way. And perhaps having done, I think, all this work with a PhD is definitely something that has helped my own understanding and playing, and therefore the art of music making in a way.
I think even aside from like soft skills that you gain through the whole experience, or, you know, personal development or anything, just from a job market perspective, 100% having the PhD has helped me even beyond my academic work. But I will say that, you know, in my work, because I work with a lot of, you know, occupational therapists and psychologists and, you know, people like, you know, in the medical community, I think that coming into it as Dr. Erin Parks and not just Erin Parks, the piano teacher, helps a lot. And I think, and from the perspective too of in my work in like building a community and building an institute and all of that stuff, I think that it gives you some clout. You know, I think that when you're trying to pull other organizations into your work or pull prominent people into your work or get people on board, you know, it gives some credibility. So just from a job market perspective, even if you're not looking to get into academia, there are a lot of connections and a lot of doors that can open and a lot of possibilities that become possibilities because you have a PhD. And then aside from that, you do gain a lot of skills that can help you to do all of those things as well. I don't know if I'm as positive as Juan Sebastian that I would say, if it wasn't helping me in terms of my career, I don't know if I would have done it, because it was pretty intense. But it definitely is helping me. Like I don't regret doing it at all. I think it's been a huge door opener.
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit less. Well, I think partly I'm less positive about the PhD because of my focus on just research. I think I gained a lot. I think I gained a lot of skills, important skills, in public speaking, in writing. I became, developed my own sort of writing voice in the PhD, and research skills. Managing a project, self-directed thing. There's a lot of skills I gained, but the issue that I had when I was looking for work outside, because so about a year ago, I sort of almost gave up on the academic career, and I started thinking about publishing. And I was talking, I reached out to people in publishing and asked them, how to make this transition. And the issue was that I had these skills, but I didn't have many things on the CV that I could like point to, be like, this is a demonstration of that. That I could do it if I got the interview. I could sell it. I could create a narrative that talked about my teaching, like managing TAs in terms of or I did a few. I did work with the SIMSA project, this single interface for music score searching and analysis, as their sort of grant writer, and did some administrative type work for them. So that was probably the most marketable thing I did in my PhD in terms of like something on the CV I could point to talk about. So I think if my experiences had been less research focused and more diverse, I would have had more things that I could have marketed. Like, one of the publishers was like, well, did you do it, do an edited collection that would, be useful in the sort of managing people and editing. And I'm like, oh no, I knew that was like low prestige. So I never did that, but that would have been useful.
Great. I guess now we can open it up to the floor. If anyone has a question that you'd like to ask yourself, you can unmute yourself and ask it. You can type it in the chat and we can read it out for you. You can send it anonymously, like in a private chat, if you would like, to either me or Rebecca. We also got a few pre-submitted questions. Maybe I could ask one of those now first. This one is specifically for Nina. It says, I'd like to hear from Nina about her experience of the job search process, what she submitted as application materials, what interviews were like, etc., and how she has found her new position at Brock so far.
Okay, that's a big question. Well, it's very variable, like in terms of what you need to submit for each job and what they're specifically looking for. I mean, I think I'm really lucky to find this job. Like, I'm not like I'm not like undervaluing myself. It's just especially like I found it in the pandemic. It's just, I think it's how do I answer this question? Sorry. And how am I finding the job now? It's a lot. Well, right now it's like basically I'm just trying to teach, just trying to get through, stay a few days ahead of the students. It's mostly teaching and service right now, mostly teaching. I mean, later on, once I'm repeating classes, then I'll have more time to do research. Yeah, the job documents, some schools require a lot of different things. You send it to people, and if anyone wants to send send me things, I'm happy to comment, because, you know, that's the thing. Like when I wrote my first cover letter, I had no idea what I was doing. And my advisor wasn't really that helpful. Like once I had produced a draft, he was able to comment on it. But like, I was like, well, what do I even put in it? I had no idea, like, because I had been a student up until that point. Like I hadn't really applied to too many jobs. So I didn't know where to begin. The teaching statement also, I had no idea. Like I had done some teaching, but I had no training in pedagogy, like zero training in how to teach. So I had never thought about pedagogy, about what I'm trying to achieve. I was just focused on delivering a certain content. And now I have a lot more ideas about like how I approach teaching and how, but that was really challenging. Seek people that are a step or two ahead of you. Seek their help. I think it's also challenging because your professors are, a generation ahead of you or more. And they got a job in a very different time. And there were different expectations. A lot of these people were employed right out of their PhD, whereas now it's, you almost have to do a postdoc pretty much to be competitive. It's tough anyway. Sorry, I don't know if that was very coherent.
That was helpful, thank you. Yeah, so if anyone wants to either unmute themselves or write something in the chat, we have another submitted question. This one is directed toward Dr. Parks. What are the different avenues for a future job with a PhD in music education?
Well, I think that, other than professor, obviously, I think if you want kind of a leadership position in music education, there are a lot more people out there now, and it doesn't mean like, I'm in very much a niche, right? In special music education, like all of my work is in music for people with exceptionalities. But aside from, working in a university, I know a lot of people, like, for example, we have an organization here that's called Orchestra. That's like, it's kind of, it's like after school programs, and like the leaders of those organizations often have advanced degrees too. At Lotus Center, there are 2 of us with PhDs and 3 with masters, just because we really try to be leaders in developing curriculum, developing pedagogy, developing new teaching techniques, and then we train teachers on them. And so I think that, if you're looking for jobs like that, like for me, when I'm hiring, people to be in a, high level position at Lotus Center, I look for those advanced degrees for people that I know have, done a lot of critical thinking about pedagogy, that have the tools to apply evidence-based techniques, that know how to look at the research that's out there and extract things that they can apply in a practical way to teaching. And especially because that work is not done a lot. There's not a lot of people that have those skills. So, for any job where those things are going to be required, I think having a PhD and being able to say, I have both the research and the practice, if you're going into like a practical music education position, is really valuable. So I'd say whether it's starting your own thing or going to work for, a music education organization or a school or an institute or something like that, that mesh of skills I find is really lacking. It's growing, there's more and more of it. But I think that it's so important to be able to have the skills to do evidence-based application.
So it looks like we have a question from Valerie. I'll just read it out. There are unprecedented resources in university pedagogy currently, especially since the beginning of the pandemic. Many of our graduate students have access to these resources. Some professors do lots of mentoring in teaching with graduate students. You need to find, oh, sorry, it's more of a comment than a question. I didn't look for the question mark at the end.
Maybe I should just say it out loud. You know, the pandemic has completely changed university pedagogy. It's been transformed. So because when you teach online and when you're teaching from a distance, you have to think deeply about your objectives and how you're teaching and all the other stuff. So I'm hearing what some of you are saying, and this has been an incredible time for university pedagogy. Our pedagogical services say 10 years, we are 10 years ahead of where we wanted to be. So this is trickling down. So I'm hoping that some of you will have access, and maybe you need to find those people, those who are in PhDs. There are people who mentor graduate students. I have lots of graduate students that shadow me in classes. I'm hearing what you're saying, Nina. None of my graduate students leave here not knowing how to teach. It's true, I'm in music education, but a student who comes in here and who thinks they're going to be teaching later will shadow somebody. I mean, there are all kinds of stuff out there, and there are so many resources. We are just in a period where these things are available. So there's no reason why this can happen, but the opportunities have to be made for graduate students to access those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, basically, I learned how to write a cover letter from the professors and of course, now that I have some experience, I have, there's some but it's a good place to, things like that is a good place to start. She has a blog, but also the book. So yeah, there's, I don't know how people cope before the internet.
Can I just say something too, though, about that point about not learning how to teach? I think both for PhD students who are on track to be professors, that's what they're going to do. It is super weird to me that that's not part of the curriculum, is learning how to teach, but also for performers. And I know, Juan Sebastian, you said you're teaching, like most performers are going to teach unless they're like at the top 10% of performers out there that don't need to do it. And performers are not really taught pedagogy either unless they seek it out. And I would love to see it not be so siloed eventually, that there is some recognition of what are the skills you're actually going to need, not just you're in performance, let's teach performance, but preparing better for the job market and what you're, not just the job market, but what you're actually going to be doing in your work.
It's spotty. Like, I think it's common for, say, the music theory pedagogy. Like, there's often a course on that. And voice pedagogy. I was talking with the voice teacher at my university, and she, I was like, yeah, I was a performer in my undergrad, and I never took a pedagogy class, and she thought that was bizarre because I guess in voice she's like, well, me learning to sing was paired with me learning how to teach people to sing. But that was totally not the case for me as an instrumentalist. Yeah, I mean, I could have done more. I know that there are like optional, certificates and extra like courses that are run at McGill that I probably, I was just, again, focused on the research track. So I didn't seek those things out. And I'm sure there were more opportunities that I could have taken advantage of.
Yes, I think I agree with what you were saying, Erin. In fact, in my experience, I did take a couple of courses in education, from the bachelor, then the master's, but here's the thing: I think the whole curricula could be reviewed in a way that is more hands-on, like practical experience. Because one thing is to take a course in 4 years, and another thing is then you have an instrument, you have someone you have to teach, and then suddenly everything falls apart because you don't know how to do so. And then you might have a kid, or you might have an adult, an amateur, or you have an university student. So the needs are very different and very specific to what we're supposed to work with. But it's the same with the research component. If you think, I always thought, even in my bachelor, I didn't like music history, and I love history now. But I'm like, why so? I mean, most of people didn't like music history. And the reason, and it's so fascinating when we think about, I mean, there's so much, it's so rich music history, but it's because they're divided. You think, okay, if I'm working on a Bach cello suite, maybe I could learn about Bach and apply that knowledge into my playing and inform what I'm doing. But that never happened, never, in my whole music education. So I think still there are a lot of big gaps, that are not only with the music education. Of course, it's a big gap because you're right. Most of performers we teach, and a lot of I have to say, a lot of teachers, they end up teaching because that's the only thing they can do, and it's a bit sad actually when those people didn't have the chances to have real experiences before actually teaching. And but yeah, I mean, there's always, I think, room for improvement in the curriculum. But yeah.
I think that kind of applied research element is really important too, though, because I actually did, my first master's was actually in musicology. And I switched to music ed because I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I wanted to do something with it. I mean, I had been teaching for many years already and teaching piano. But that's what I always would have found interesting is, okay, what can we learn about history? Now, what do we, performance practice kinds of things. I know there is, there are venues where that performance practice is explored, but I think that, yeah, all those connections that could be made to make things more practical and usable so it isn't so siloed, they're happening in pockets, but I think that it would make, any music degree, whether it's a graduate degree or even undergrad degrees, so much more valuable for graduates.
Any last questions from anyone?
I realized that the question that was directed at me, it was kind of a bit broad and I didn't know how to approach it. If you have any, if there's aspects of the question I didn't actually address, if you have, you can put it in the chat or email me. I'm happy to respond by email. I'm npenner@brocku.ca.
May I ask a question? One thing I just wanted to say, this has been absolutely magnificent. You've been so honest and thoughtful and helpful. This turn that Valerie initiated with her comment and question, can I ask you, I hear what you're saying. We need to change the curriculum. I'm not talking about music. I know nothing about how they do it in music. I'm talking about in my own faculty, so that it's more hands-on and it's more interdisciplinary. I love this idea, and I do it with people in theater, of bringing history and artistic practice into conversation. It's extremely valuable on both sides. If there was one thing you'd like to see changed in the PhD curriculum, what would it be?
I would definitely say that there should be a component that's focused on teaching, other than just a TA-ship, where you're basically just working, but something where they're teaching you how to teach, teaching you pedagogy, that would be, I think, most marketable. Like Nina was saying, like things you can put on your CV that is like, this demonstrates that I'm ready for this job that I'm applying for now. But also just, would give us some higher level of self-efficacy when we go to do that work, right? That we feel like we're prepared and we're competent to do this work.
Yeah, I could see it sort of like a two-pronged thing. Like you could have, in my field, I would have loved like music history pedagogy. I would have taken that course. And McGill has tons of people who are studying musicology. There would be no problem populating that course. It would be full, I'm sure. And, because there's just a lot of issues. The field is changing so fast, like me doing this music and global culture, because we're trying to do anti-colonial or, decolonize music and make it less Western and have some, theoretical discussions about how we're going to do that. So that's like more theoretical, but then in a practical sense, like, I don't know, maybe it'd be part of that course or something else that, you'd get more mentorship on your teaching. Like my advisor came to exactly one of my classes and offered me feedback, and that was really valuable, but it was just like one time, and it just, to have more supervision, have more, I don't know how they do music theory pedagogy. There's probably some practical component, but like, you teach a class and get some feedback from like the other people in the class, or something like that. It worked into the degree that everybody has to do, basically. It's not this like extra thing that you have, you could do.
I agree with both things. I think what Erin was saying about the teaching is very, very important. And like you were saying, Paul, about the more hands-on experience, I think that's very, very important, because there are people that are very talented or very good at doing research, but then there's big gaps, I think, that in which we don't adapt that knowledge or research or performance into our world, into our reality. How do we make it accessible? I think that's very important. I won't really tell you how to do so. I mean, you do a final presentation, a thesis defense, or whatever, depending on the program. But how do you actually make it more valuable? How you make it more meaningful, right? Your research, your performance, and that's something that we could explore much more. I mean, part is what we were talking before about doing things more multidisciplinary, connecting things and not separating, instead of separating, connecting things.
Maybe I can just say what you said, a word before, somebody said it, valuable. And it's one of the reasons why things don't happen at the university, because there are things that are valued and other things are not. And I can say, being in music education and trying to really champion pedagogy for all, because you will all teach music, almost all of you, and I've taught all my life, and teaching in high school is not the same as teaching at the university, because I did that for almost 15 years. So it's not the same pedagogy, it's not the same approach. So what is valued? Well, what you said, Nina, all my graduate students who teach with me, they shadow me. So I have a student teaching at University of Sherbrooke, and she shadows me every week. That means she's with me on technology. She's exactly what I do. It's a new class for her. She's never taught it before. So she's not insecure. She has all the material. She does the class. She does it her way, but she shadows. And I've done that with multiple students. Is that valued? Not at all. Do I get anything on my CV for that? Nothing. Is it really important? Yes. It's essential to university pedagogy, among many other things. But mentoring graduate students in pedagogy, you actually have somebody at McGill. Now, her name is Andrea Creech. She is like the queen of university pedagogy, because she was with us. She's a very good friend of mine and a colleague. Donc, that's a wonderful thing for McGill, and a very sad thing for us, because she left here. So that's a wonderful thing, So anyway, when we say there are people out there, there are. You have to find them. They are there, but it's difficult because it's not valued. It's not valued for professors to take the time to mentor you, but it's super important. And it's the most fun work we do, is to work with you. Anyway, it's the most meaningful work I do. Anyway, just putting it out there.
Thank you so much, everyone. Since we've gone over time, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I want to thank everyone for being with us today. It was a very great session. Thank you so much to our host, Shanti and Rebecca. Thank you to our speakers. If you want to know more about them, you can reach out to them by going to our TRaCE website. You'll find their profile and their information. And if you want to know more about the TRaCE project, you're welcome to reach out to us. Thank you again to everyone who joined us. Thank you to our speakers, our guests, and I wish you all a very wonderful weekend.